And we're back, or I'm back. Happy Thanksgiving to all those who told the truth in this election. That's how Thomas Friedman titles his current column at the New York Times. And he points out that with all of these, with so many families gathering in person or virtually, which is the rational way to do it this year, if you're looking for a special way to say grace this year, if you do say a blessing before you have your meals, which, okay, don't comment on them. I just let it go. Okay. Friedman says if you're going to do that, if you're going to say a prayer before your meal, he recommends the West Point Cadet prayer. You know what that is? That prayer calls upon each of those future military leaders to always choose, quote, the harder right instead of the easier wrong, end quote. And that West Point Cadet prayer also includes, quote, no fear when truth and right are in jeopardy, end quote. Wow. Huh? And the thing that really irritates me is that one of the million plus things that irritate me, the Secretary of State for the Orange Bastard, Mike Pompeo, graduated first in his class at West Point. He must never have attended chapel when he was at West Point. Huh? Anyway, as Friedman points out, we should be truly thankful this Thanksgiving that after the Orange Bastard spent the last 3 weeks refusing to acknowledge that he lost re-election, and he got the willful cooperation of most of the American Fascist Party to support him in this power play, to ignore what the voters said. You've got to think about that for a moment. This is what they tried to do, is to say to the 80 million people who voted against this son of a bitch, your vote doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything. We're going to reinstall our glorious leader in office. But in spite of all that, we had, as Friedman writes, we had a critical mass of civil servants, elected officials, and judges who did their jobs, always opting for that, what is mentioned in the West Point Cadet prayer, the harder right, the more difficult right. And their acknowledgement, all these civil servants, come on, Mike, acknowledgement that justice demanded not the so-called easy or wrong that Trump and his filthy allies were pressing for. And there were millions of civil servants. You know what Trump calls the deep state. Yeah, you're goddamn right it's a deep state, you ugly bastard, you. It's a deep state that maintains the functions of democracy. God, I'll be glad when this bastard is gone. Oh, my God. Anyway, it was their collective integrity, the civil servants, I don't like that term, but let's use it, the people who work in the deep state, it was their collective integrity, their willingness to stand with America, not with either party, that protected our democracy when it was facing one of its greatest threats from within. There's no invasive force standing in ships off the coast of New Jersey or Georgia or Florida or California. There was no invading force swooping down from Canada or swooping up from Mexico. No. The biggest threat to American democracy since the treason committed by white people in the South during the Civil War, the biggest threat has been this orange son of a bitch, Donald Trump. And his minions, and his cucumbers, and his maggots, and his militias, and his bully boys, and this childish juvenile group of thumbsuckers, the Proud Boys. Oh, give me a fucking break. Excuse me. Proud Boys. I got your Proud Boys right here. Boys. Jesus. But it was the integrity of the civil servants in this country. The people whose names you and I will never know. We'll never know anything about them. But they provided the grip on democracy that held things together while we went through this horrific assault by this monstrous Donald Trump. Who do these people include? Well, Friedman include, what does he say here? He says, I'm talking about FBI Director Christopher Wray, a Trump appointee, who in September openly contradicted the president and declared that historically we have not seen, quote, any kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort in a major election, end quote, involving mail-in voting. But no offense to the integrity of Christopher Wray, because I do believe that he does display integrity in a horrifically difficult position. But saying that there is no kind of coordinated national voter fraud effort is like saying, newsflash, water's wet, and the sun appears to rise in the east every morning, and it appears to rise in the west every evening. I mean, a coordinated national voter fraud effort? That was what Trump and the Russian military intelligence agents perpetrated against this country in 2015 to get this orange bastard into the Oval Office in 2016. But I digress. Friedman says he's also talking about Georgia's Secretary of State right here in my adopted state, Brad Raffensperger, who is a conservative Republican, but he's not a Nazi like Trump, like Stephen Miller, like the scum that operates out of the Oval Office. No. It was Raffensperger who oversaw the Georgia count and recount, and now we're into the second recount done by computer. It was Raffensperger who insisted that Biden had won fair and square, and that his state's two Republican senators, these two con artists and thieves and liars, and they are both David Perdue and this Kelly Loeffler, that they didn't garner enough votes to avoid election runoffs. That would have been so easy to obfuscate, to set up a fraud around which those two would have gotten the votes necessary. In Georgia, you have to have 50% plus a vote in order to win an election. But Perdue and Loeffler, these two criminals, they dishonorably, but that's what they are. They're both dishonorable people. They opted for the easier wrong, the one prohibited by the West Point cadet student prayer, the easier wrong, and brazenly demanded that Georgia's Secretary of State resign for not declaring them the winners. Do you remember that little exercise in treason by these two rotten bastards, Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, who jointly demanded that our Secretary of State here, a conservative Republican, resign because he did not commit the sort of fraud they knew was necessary for them to be declared the winners of the Georgia Senate elections. It's just unbelievable what these son of a bitches have done across the country. I'm just citing for you the example here in Georgia. How about Chris Krebs? Friedman brings him up too, the director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Now, Krebs not only refused to back up Trump's filthy claims of election fraud. But his agency issued a statement calling the 2020 election, quote, the most secure in American history, end quote. And then in the release that agency sent out, and this is important in the age of Trump, Christopher Krebs added in bold-faced type, quote, there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised, end quote. Oh, well, as soon as in a manner of speaking, the ink was dry on that statement, Christopher Krebs was shown the door. So Krebs did the West Point cadet prayer thing. He did the hard right thing. And Trump fired him by tweet for it. Right? And Mitch McConnell, that slimy, rotten little turd who runs the Senate, he did the easy wrong thing. He didn't utter a single peep of protest when Trump did that. Not a sound. So that attempt to, the many attempts to nullify the will of the people casting their ballots shifted the post-election struggle from Trump versus Biden. Biden had the most votes by millions to Trump versus the Constitution. And that shifted the struggle to who had the raw power and who had the will to defend or ignore the Constitution of the United States. Thank God Trump didn't have the power to ignore the Constitution. The Constitution was rolled into a cylinder and slapped across Trump's ugly, florid, jowly face. Blam! Sit down and shut up, you asshole. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com. And never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.